The Invincibles from DOOMVAULT are classic ICRPG monsters. But I was thinking about it the other day, and if new GMs play their cards right, the Invincible may be the very first monster they run in the system. Not goblins, not kobolds, unkillable, unstoppable monsters that can take out a character or an entire party in just a few swings. Now that sounds pretty intense, but it also sounds pretty awesome. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about these monsters and how you can include them in your game and be a little bit more confident running them in either the DOOMVAULT or other adventures. Now, fun fact, you can't actually find the Invincibles in Master Edition. They're not in the book. If you go to the monster manual, you'll see that they're missing. You have to go to that adventure packet, or you have to revert back to ICRPG Core, and you'll find them there. So within the DOOMVAULT adventure, you have these monsters, and you'll see that the very first thing players do in the DOOMVAULT is they go through the crags of Norberg, they climb down to Hag's Roost, they climb across that cliff face until they get to the long pattern, and here at the end of the long pattern is where the Invincibles wait for them. 2 of them. So this is the very first monster, if you're running DOOMVAULT for the very first time, that you have to contend with. But what are Invincibles? Well, the Invincibles are dark, evil creatures, slaves to the Ogdru cultists. They are pretty tough. They've got a +5 to all their rolls. They've got 2 actions per round that they take. They've got some pretty big hits. Their broken weapon always does ultimate. Their stranglehold, they grab, and then with a hard strength roll, the target can break free or take ultimate every round in their grasp, which is pretty intense. They shield bash, which is players take ultimate damage from this attack, and then they are thrown far backwards. And if you hit anything while sliding back, they take normal weapon. So a D12 plus potentially another D6. And then their battle call, if they're in combat for more than 3 rounds, the Invincible will yell, and their companion will arrive in 1 round to assist. So you could very quickly have 1, 2, 3 Invincibles all around you, and these guys can't be killed. They're indestructible. They're invincible. But how do you do that? How can you include these guys in your game right off the bat, especially if you're introducing new players to ICRPG? The very first monster they face is an unkillable Invincible. Well, I want to give you 3 tips on how to do that. I've got the Invincible art here. I've got my monster sheet, and I've also got the map all set up. The 3 things that I want to encourage you to do is, the first one is make them known. Make them known to the players. The second one is to treat them like guards, or give them a specific purpose, for example. And the third one is keep them around. Okay, let's talk through each one of those. So the first one is make them known. Like I said, the very first place that they're going to encounter the Invincibles is right here at the back end of the long pattern. So our players come up, they've come across Hag's Roost, and they start exploring this long pattern. What I like to do in this moment is that even though the long pattern may be dark, as soon as they light some form of torch, or as they get closer, I start describing these shadowy figures here at the back end of the hall. They're looming, they're waiting, they don't seem to be doing anything. You can't even tell if they're statues or actual figures. So right away, I'm encouraging my players to investigate this. But the whole point of that is that by the time they get to about here, I want to give them all the information they need to know that these are Invincibles, whether that is through a mage doing some kind of intelligence check to say, what are these things? Do I recognize the runes on their bodies? Whatever. Or I just flat out tell them, hey, these are Invincibles. They are unkillable dark servants of Ogdru. And then players like, Invincibles? Invincibles? Are they? Do you really mean that? Yes, I really mean that. They are Invincibles. They cannot die. They cannot be killed. They cannot take damage. The reason why you want that information given throughout the long pattern is that by the time they get to this point where they're actually dealing with the Invincibles, they need to know that the challenge is not how do you kill these things, the challenge is how do I get past them. That's the problem that players have to solve, and you're just presenting them with this situation. If you're vague, this can go on for quite some time. Players don't immediately assume that a monster is truly invincible. They assume, oh, I'm not hitting hard enough, or they have some immunities. It's like, no, these things are Invincibles. I need to move past them. It's a moot point to try to, just kill them because it's not going to happen. But additionally, the other information that I'm hoping to give them is that just because they're unkillable doesn't mean they can't be affected by other things. So for example, we'll set a little invincible figure here. Our mage could step up and cast webs on them to freeze them in place, or ice, or elemental earth. Our great warrior could come up with his great sword and slam into him with his great sword, and even though he may not take damage, he hits hard enough that the invincible slams into the wall, makes that nice imprint into the stone, and has to climb out while the players rush past. There's a lot of different options to do because these invincibles are unkillable, but they're not immune to everything. So players can get creative, and you can play around with ways to position the invincibles so that they're not just standing there literally as an impassable barrier. Okay? So that's the very first thing. You need to let players know what they are, make them known to the players well in advance, and be honest with them that they are invincibles. That can adjust how they address these creatures. The second point is keeping them as guards or having a specific purpose. In the event of the DOOMVAULT, their whole goal is to defend this inner layer of the Ogdru, and so they are guards first and foremost. So what happens is that these Invincibles don't do anything until they've crossed this imaginary line. At that point, the Invincibles step into action. The reason why you want to treat them with guards or give them a purpose is that even though these things are unstoppable killing machines, we're not trying to use them to kill players right now. What we're doing is guarding this place. So even if our archer, our ranger, was dropped, the Invincible would grab the character and take him all the way back to the beginning and toss him out and say, good riddance, get out of here, I'm a bouncer, you're out. This presents some interesting dilemmas for players. For example, if a player drops and the Invincible stops what it's doing and begins dragging that character away, what do you do as players? Do you go back and try to help your friend, or do you continue on with stopping the ritual? It's a dynamic, moral imperative choice. If they choose to move forward, I wouldn't have this player now have to sit through rounds and rounds of getting dragged back to the front. It's just the very next round, you wake up, you're on Hag's Roost, and you're back in the game with 1 HP. Right? And then that way they can get back involved, but now they're separated. If you have the Invincibles have a specific purpose, then you can play them to that, rather than just tank and spank standing there killing one player after the other as it goes along. The last thing that I want you to keep in mind is that you want to keep these Invincibles around, especially in the DOOMVAULT. These Invincibles are such classic, fun monsters. Dropping them in should be almost an event. They show up, and now you have to deal with them throughout. They're made by dark, dark magic. You don't do this on a whim. One of my favorite things to do, as the players move past the Invincibles, because they eventually will get past, and they run down to the Mirror Lake and face what were once men, and the Ropers, and all the other things that's in store for them throughout the rest of the map, is I will roll down a timer, and I'll just have an ongoing timer of 3 rounds or 2 rounds. Every time they enter a new scene, I'll re-roll the timer, and then in that many rounds, the Invincible shows up entering the scene as well and continues on towards the players, adding this constant back pressure to the players. If they stop and they get delayed, if they get stuck here at the Mirror Lake, or if they get stuck at the Guardians, this Invincible is going to continue pushing on their rear, and eventually they're going to catch them, you're going to have to deal with them again, and again you have this option where players could then be taken and dragged back to the beginning. Especially later on, this can be devastating to the party. But it can add so much fun pressure that is so indicative of index card RPG, having these Invincibles just slowly plodding along. They can easily be outrun, but they won't stop. And as you move along, they're always coming. You always hear them coming. You always watch that timer happening. And eventually, they will catch up, especially near the end. It's a very good chance they'll show up, and now you're not only dealing with Ogdru and the cultists, you're dealing with a couple of Invincibles that have stepped up, and then the end of the Doom Vault, the cave might collapse, and our Invincibles may be trapped under a mountain of stone and rock. But that's what makes Invincibles so much fun, is that they can be an element of your game that you don't have to worry about losing just because a player got a really good hit on them. Like, they can be this constant thread throughout your adventure, and you can include them as these invincible elements. But as long as you play them in a way that doesn't just nullify the players, it adds to the game rather than takes away. It's not cool for you to just drop in Invincible and say, it's invincible, you can't do anything about it, I'm just, you're dead. It's like, no, use this as a story element, use this as a narrative, make them known, give players all the information they need, have them have a purpose, like being a guard or something else, and keep them around, because these are classics. You want them to have as much showtime as you possibly can without taking away from the players. But what do you think? How would you run these Invincibles, or how have you seen them run in games that you've either played in or as the GM? I would love to hear about them in the comments. If you're looking for more adventures and more monsters that you may be missing out on in the Master Edition, you can always go grab the Adventure module on the ICRPG Community Content site, or you can check out some of the monster sets that I'm building over on Ko-Fi if you need. We just released the Deadwood monster set, which is a ton of fun for Ghost Mountain. But for now, I think it's time to head back to the kiln. We've got lots of fun projects to do, and I hope your projects are going well. Hope you guys have a good rest of your Friday, and we'll catch you next time.